All right, welcome back, everybody. So, you may notice that I am not on the screen today live anyway, or, recorded live. Instead, you just see a still shot. So, two things had come up in some feedback, and that was one, the camera that I use, which is my MacBook Pro camera, wouldn't get things to a higher resolution than 720, I believe, and that it made some of the things I was showing you on the screen a little difficult to read. So I am going to zoom in a little bit, but also, more importantly, I tried to upgrade my camera. And while in the process, I've somehow disabled this camera and the other camera doesn't work. So, yeah, here we are. You'll still be able to hear my voice. Speaking of, that's the other piece of feedback. Some folks said that I need to slow down and enunciate more. I think I warned you about that in the first video if you watched it, where I tell you I'm from the South, and in the South. I don't know. We have that drawn out kind of sound, and it's a little annoying if you're not used to it, but it also can be a little unclear. So, in addition to just trying to speak a little clearer, I also got a new microphone here, so I hope that this is better. If not, let me know and we'll try to make it even better yet. All right, so for this week, we are at week 3, and it's all about figuring out your topic at this point. You know that in this class, we are going with the theme of think practically or think nationally, act practically. So we want to pick a topic that's of national importance, and it could be, again, something that we see in the news all the time. God help us, COVID and political issues and that sort of thing. It could also be anything else if you don't want to think about those things right now, as long as it's related to the theme of the class. And I guess that's sort of a two-sided coin, because on one hand you get away from the COVID and politics, but then you think, oh yeah, even when we solve these problems, assuming we will, we've got other things we got to deal with too. Great. So let's just go ahead and, as a group, decide that hey, we've got enough to deal with COVID and people storming capitals and hating each other. So when this thing's all over, we're going to be ready to solve some other big problems. So if you want to pick politics, go for it. If you want to pick COVID, go for it. But do be more specific than, um, you know, here's COVID. And you're going to give us this big overarching talk about it. Get more specific than that. Is it to this particular audience? Maybe it's the long term effects, which we're not totally clear on yet. So, okay, let's say that you wanted to do that. What would you do for the persuasive speech? Again, there's lots of right answers. But just as you develop your topics, think a little bit more specific than you would in a broad way. And so that's one of the things we're going to touch on today. Before we move on, I do want to tell you that Quiz 2 is due this week. Don't forget that. And next week, your topic and source assignment is due. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about. So if you would, in your packet, go ahead and scroll down. I believe it's page 23. I'm going to be off on that. 18, then 19. Like when it's off. There we go. Really, you can go ahead and go to page 19, and this is where we'll start talking about topics and sources. However, just to give you the preview, scroll past all that until you get to page 23 and 24. So these two sheets, 23, and then there's 24. This is what you're going to turn in next week. So first, your topic and a page really is pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. What is your topic? How will you discuss it informatively, not informally, but informatively, right? So, not persuading us, just giving us information. You're sort of educating us, you're teaching us about your topic. And how can you tie it to Grand Valley? Think about how you'll do something persuasive with this. What side might you take? And again, how can you make part of your solution to the problem come to Grand Valley? How can you connect us as a university to solving whatever problem it is that you choose. And last, why is this relevant to your audience? This is something you should always ask yourself in this class and others, and beyond. Whenever you speak, think about why that audience cares about what you have to say. And if you can do that and tell them why they should care about your topic, you're going to be much better received than someone who just starts talking and assumes that because they think it's important, everyone else will too. So we'll talk later about how you can be very specific. And in fact, I'd like to hear you say, you should care about this topic because, and then give us specific reasons to care as this particular audience. So focus on the college students there. But what you see on the screen is an example I've given you talking about college campuses and oral communication centers, so the speech lab. So, how will I talk about it in an informative way? I'll discuss the number of comm centers in America, what they do, how they vary, the National Association of Comm Centers, and then for Grand Valley, I'll talk about how our speech lab is, one of the top communication centers in the country, and I'll tie it in there. Then persuasively, I'll argue that people should go to the speech lab, students especially should go to the speech lab, and I will give you a solution, and of course that solution will be for you, the people listening to the message. You should go to the speech lab on campus. Everyone should use it across the country if they have that option, but let's talk about what we have available to us. And then why do you care about this? Well, you need to practice. You're going to have to give these presentations in class and beyond. So get some good practice in and do it with someone who's not your roommate, who really gets tired of hearing you practice these things, I imagine, or your significant other or whoever. So come see us, and that would be the connection to this audience. Now, at this point, and again, this is not due at the end of this week, to be clear, right? This is due at the end of next week. But since we're talking about this topic and source chapter, I want to go ahead and just review what you'll be expected to do. So answer these questions the best you can. For example, you may know that you want to talk about, I'm looking around the room to try to just find something. Okay, here's an Energizer battery thing. You want to talk about batteries being thrown away and how that's hurting the environment. Let's go with that. So informatively, I could just tell you, okay, here is the number of batteries thrown out. Here's what happens when you throw out a battery. Here's the difference between I don't know what they're specifically called. I'd have to look it up, but like a dry cell battery and a wet cell, or a alkaline or a lithium and all that. Then persuasively, I may not be super clear on what I want to do yet, but I know I want to say something about we need to stop throwing away batteries. We need to recycle all of them. And then I imagine I would say at Grand Valley, I would like to either start or popularize a program that would allow us to recycle batteries on campus so that we could lead the way in stopping battery waste. So that's the things that I'm looking for here. Again, if you don't have a specific outline yet, that's just fine, but at least have an idea of how you will, discuss this topic. Okay, on page 24, we move on to the source part of the assignment. And here you're going to find 3 sources. Those will be a peer-reviewed journal article. You will find a news source, a credible news source, and you will find some other source that is also credible. It's a good source. And we'll talk today about what is credible, what's not, what you should use, what you shouldn't, generally speaking. But, give us this information. So for mine, you've got a peer-reviewed journal article. I'll tell you what kind it is, the name of it, the journal it was published in, the author, and the date. You don't have to even give me that much for yours beyond this assignment. For this one, I'd like as much as you can put there. But when you get to your speech, we'll talk about how I just need the publication and the date. That's it. Just for this one, it would be Comm Centers Journal 2019. That's all I would need in your oral citation during the speech. But give it all here. Then tell us why it's credible. For peer-reviewed journal articles, we'll talk about how those are just credible by themselves because of what they are. There are a couple exceptions, but we'll discuss that. How will you plan to use this? It could just be as simple as saying general information about the topic. But eventually, you're going to have to figure out exactly how you want to use it and what part of it you want to use, etc., etc. So, if you go ahead and know your topic, which you will by the time you get to this page, well, great. Go ahead and figure out what you might use it for. Again, it doesn't have to be finalized, it just needs to have an idea brewing. And then, if there is a very specific quotation, a statistic, something like that, you could put it over here, and that would help you keep up with it. So for me in this assignment, I need to A, see that you have decided on a topic, and B, see that you can find these sources, right? Peer reviewed journal, news source, and another, whatever you like, credible source. For you, you're going to have to tell us in your speech why it's credible. Then you're going to use it, obviously, in the speech, and then you're going to need to figure out what you're going to say about it. So this will help you sort of keep up with things. If you're familiar with annotated bibliographies, this is considered an annotation of your sources. If that's new to you and confusing, forget I said it. If it's just an easy way to keep up with not only what you're going to use as a source, but how. Let me say this last, and then we'll start talking about the actual chapter. Just because you put something on this sheet does not mean you're married to it. You don't have to use it, by all means in the actual first speech. If you want to and it fits and it's good, yes, use it. Why not? But if you find that something else is better, or it really doesn't fit with how you eventually land on your outline for the way you're going to approach the topic, for example, get rid of it. Find something else. That's okay. Really, for me, I need to see that you can find them. Okay, if you have other questions on that, hold those, because next week is, again, when this is due. It's not due this week, but again, since we're on this chapter, I wanted to touch on that so that you'll know as you're going through and listening to the lecture here about what is due and when. Again, at this point, if you are you're 12 minutes in, so if you're feeling like you need a break or whatever, I know it's different from watching a video than it is being in a lecture, but just timestamp this thing, take some notes, and you should be able to get through it there. And remember, you can always stop, pause it, come back, do what you got to do. Okay, so our topic, as you know, topics and sources. To repeat, we know that our topics need to be national issues that we can approach somehow later in the solution to a problem at Grand Valley. Beyond that general sort of criteria for your topics, there are some other things that you need to use as a checklist, questions you should ask yourself. And the first one is this an appropriate topic? Let me try to get it a little tighter here in case it's not clear for you. Is this an appropriate topic? Don't embarrass yourself or others. I'm going to tell you a true story. On my mom, it's true. I had a student in class once, I won't even say where, who wanted to give wanted to choose as a topic an addiction to pornography, which is a real problem for some people, sure. This particular individual had been addicted to pornography in the past, and they wanted to talk about it as their speech to inform others, and then later to sort of warn them about the dangers. And, it came off like just a lead balloon. People laughed, and understandably, it's not a funny topic, but when it's so off of what you would expect, it can be off-putting, or at least surprising, to the point where the only emotion or reaction that you can muster is this laughter, because it just comes out. But the student gave some specifics about what they used to do physically, and it was embarrassing. And I felt embarrassed for the person, though they never seemed to notice that they should be embarrassed. But I feel like it just made everybody uncomfortable. So if you have a topic that's in that realm, whether it's that direction with the body, or if it's in another completely different direction, but still a little bit questionable, Let's just say if you have to wonder about it, maybe you should think about something else. Now, listen, as you're thinking about these, shoot me an email if you're not sure. Like, would this work for our class? Well, I would try to think. Have you looked at these items here? You know, the 5 criteria you see on the screen, but uh, it's an individual kind of thing. So make sure that it's appropriate. Next, make sure it's controversial, and don't overthink controversial. Controversial really just means that there are at least two conflicting sides or positions that people could take. So, it doesn't have to be something that is just socially controversial, something like pro life, pro choice. I've heard people talk about Macs versus PCs, for example, and that, we should streamline everything. Now, it's America. We have the right to choose, and it's a capitalist economy. So, hey, we can pick a Mac or a PC or a Linux or whatever the third option is. There's probably more. But I've heard it argued that we should pick one because it would streamline everything, make it easy to plug in everywhere we go. People would all know how to use the same system. You wouldn't have these Mac illiterate people or PC illiterate people. You would all just speak the same language. You can make that case, and you could say at Grand Valley we're going to get rid of all the X machines, whatever, and replace them with all the Y machines. Sure, that would work for this, because it's appropriate. It's controversial because it has at least two sides. There are usually many more than two, but make sure yours has at least two. Timeliness. It should be something that is important now or in the future, but not the past. And what I mean is not so much in like a historical context, but people in the past have tried to talk about things that impact high school students or elementary school students, like phys ed in K through 12. That's not really a good timely topic for this audience. Now, if we were the PTA, yeah, it'd be real timely. If we were a bunch of K through 12 teachers or students or whoever connected, sure, it would work. But everybody here has finished K through 12, some very recently, and we're done with that. We're ready to move on with the future. And again, the argument can be made, well, what about the future when you have children? There's no promise of that, so we can't guarantee it. Plus, that's a maybe for some people, and we don't need to, bank that people are going to be interested on something that's so subjective. Keep that in mind. Make sure it's timely. It's not something that you're talking about who was right or wrong in the Spanish-American War or something. No, it needs to be now, both in our lives and in our historic context. So, the fourth item here is relevant, that it should matter to the lives of the audience. Now, sometimes, as you just heard, the timeliness will dictate if it's relevant. Again, thinking about wars in the past or phys ed in elementary school. But really, you can probably find a way that most of us would care about almost any topic. For example, the one about kids and exercise, phys ed and K through 12, you could say that's relevant to all of us because if students don't have this, they're more likely to become obese. If they become obese, pardon me, they're more likely to have health problems. They have health problems. Guess who gets to pay for that? Taxpayers, and that's you and me. So we should care about it. And that's true. It's just a few steps removed. You see how many things we had to say there? Well, because they get overweight, they become obese, and when they do, they have high blood sugar, and their high blood sugar leads to diabetes, and diabetes means they can't work because they could become seriously disabled. Not everybody. I'm not making that generalization, but you see where I'm going. That's at least 5, and we still haven't gotten to us yet. So try to make it in 1 or 2 steps. And I'll want you to give us at least 2 reasons why this audience should care about your topic. The last criteria there is that you must care about your topic if you expect us to care about your topic. If you are just picking something because it is, a last minute decision or just something that you happen to watch a TV show on or a documentary on, that's not necessarily a terrible idea, but if you're not passionate about it, it will show, and it will be hard for you to, later in the persuasive speech at least, sell your persuasiveness, sell your argument to us. And if that's the case, it's just not going to be effective or genuine. And the audience can usually tell that. So make sure you pick something that you do really care about. And this will make your life easier because this is your topic for the entire semester. So, you know, if it's something that you care about, you don't mind to spend the time on it, learning more. But if it's just a random topic, it gets a little old pretty fast. All right. So, how are you going to choose your topic? Well, there's different ways you can do it. Again, I want to encourage you to do this if it fits. You know, if you are working on something in another course where you needed to write a paper or do some other sort of project, and you learned a lot of information, you may have some of that information written down or on a presentation or whatever it is. I don't mind if you use that for your speech. Now, it still needs to fit within these criteria. So maybe it's appropriate, controversial, timely, and relevant, but maybe you didn't get to pick it, so you're not very passionate about it. You have a lot of info, but you're not passionate. I'm telling you, don't go that route. But if you are passionate, maybe you did get to choose your topic. Do it again. That's fine with me. Uh, as I mentioned in I think maybe the very first video, don't do this in other classes though without checking with your professor. It can be against the student code unless you have sort of permission to do it. And I just don't want to see you get caught up in anything unfortunate. But here you go for it. So that might be one way to choose the topic. You might just make a list of things that you care about and see where that goes. Turn those into questions and see if they are appropriate, controversial, timely, relevant, passionate, and take things off the list and keep going. Then you see brainstorming or concept mapping. Linear mapping and spatial mapping are a little different. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And then revise and repeat until you decide. So you just kind of keep thinking pros and cons about different topics and then pick something and go with it. Now, this could take a week for some people. This could take a couple weeks for some people. Other people can do this in 5-10 minutes. Some of you have already done it, or at least you could answer the questions above about your topic that you may do. So maybe you've already got a good idea. But what I say here with linear and spatial, let me jump over to a new document. So for a linear brainstorm, I was talking about batteries. So if I've got batteries, and then I'm just going to do this. Whoops, wrong one. What do I think of when I think batteries? I think of the uses like toys, small appliances, maybe smoke alarms, that kind of thing. When I think of those things, I think of consumers. So, and that's, kids to adults. Okay, and when I think of consumers, I think of sort of American culture. And then I think of how we like to replace things, replace versus fix. And batteries sort of plays into that. So, just like this, if this is just sort of a linear line of thinking, I started out thinking I'm going to talk about batteries and throwing them away, how that's bad. So, toys, small appliances, and smoke alarms, I could, here either continue that line of thinking and just have some ideas of what I'll say we use batteries for as a nation, as a culture. Some of it could make the argument that it's not necessary to have batteries for some things, while other things, maybe smoke alarms, are a little more important. I could say that we have convinced ourselves we need these batteries, though, because of our consumer minds that we are, as Americans, encouraged to have. And then we often replace things instead of fixing them or repairing them um, in our culture. And so then maybe I land at this other position where I say, okay, I'm in my basement right now recording this, and I have a soldering iron station here where I wire guitars. And this is, if you're not familiar, this is where you wire electronics together. And so I might completely go from batteries, okay, that's important, to, I think that we should all learn to solder. And people are thinking, the hell, what? Why do we care about this? Let's jump back over to the list here. Is it appropriate to talk about soldering? Yes, it's soldering, not sodomy. Soldering. It's fine to talk about it. Is it controversial? I think it's controversial in that people either know how to do it or they don't, and they're either interested in learning or they're not. Some people will think, "What is it now? You got to do." No, I don't. I couldn't do that, or I don't have an interest in that. But what if I could tell you that you can repair things, and instead of replacing them, you can fix them, and you'll save money. So that's the relevance. And when we don't replace things, we don't throw them away. We reduce the amount of waste we put out there. So there's two on the relevance. It's timely because our world is in a problem with global warming, climate change, and we need to reduce, reuse, and recycle. So this would help us do that. Also, money's tight right now for a lot of folks because of COVID. So this would save us some money. And it is something that I really enjoyed doing. So, yeah, I could talk about it for a semester. Great. You see, now you may have chosen that topic from sort of this linear view. Now, if that doesn't work for you, and it doesn't for everyone, another way you might do this, if I can get this to cooperate, this could be dangerous, y'all. Let's see. Okay, so let's say we've got one bubble here, and we're talking about, boy, this is rough, sorry, batteries. And we'll just call it BAT. And then what I might do is, if I were you, make these sort of offshoots of batteries and give myself sort of a time limit. Use a timer on your phone, and let's say 2 minutes, and fill in all of these. So we got 6. So things that come to mind when you think batteries. And it could be similar to what you have up here, So let's say you've got toys, small appliances, smoke alarms, consumerism, American culture, wastefulness, whatever you want to call it. Then you could branch off of that again. So let's say here we talked about, let's do necessary versus unnecessary, toys versus smoke alarms. So we'll do necessary versus unnecessary. Sure. And then from there, we should keep going, right? So let's put a little bubble off of these, and we'll put as many as we can, as many as we can fill. So then you could talk about safety is one thing that's necessary. Pleasure, sort of things to do for recreation, playing with toys. And then off of that, you could put, other options that don't require batteries. You could do historic perspective of the way toys used to be before we had batteries. You could talk about, even though we need batteries for some things, we should continue to look for alternatives in the long run, whatever it might be. And you can see how this will grow. And then it might lead you to a new topic or a different way to think about your topic. So again, whether you like linear or spatial brainstorming, concept mapping, go ahead and keep doing it. Keep doing it. So now we know the topics that you can and can't choose. Make sure your topic fits these criteria. We know how to choose it. You might need to do a little brainstorming. Again, for some folks, just the brainstorming you may get carried away with it and do it for, 30, 45 minutes, an hour. Other folks might want to just set an alarm or a timer overall for, 15 minutes max. And whatever you come out with at the end, hey, that's the one. So go for it. And again, as I mentioned before, if you need to check with me to see, is this a good topic, go for it. Most of the time, 90% or more of the time, they're going to be fine. Probably 95 or more. But if you're questioning it, if you're like, man, maybe on the edge, for whatever reason, let me know and we'll figure it out. All right. So next up, we can talk about these sources. So when you're thinking about sources, I want you to know that you definitely will need at least one for the first speech, and then two for each of the second and third speech. These academic peer-reviewed journal articles. All right, so these are the things that in the universities we really hold up as tight of research as you can get. Now, what does it mean when I say peer reviewed? It doesn't mean just that you have your friends look at it, even if your friends are experts. Let's say it really is more than that. So here's a quick nutshell of the peer review process. So I just am working on a paper right now. I had an idea about personality types of people who work in different kind of tutoring centers on campuses. And so I decided I would do a study to find out if certain people with certain types of personalities are more likely to be in one type of service than another. Why do you care about that? Well, people reading it would be the same people that hire tutors. And so maybe if we know who typically works the best, we would be able to be more selective. However, I think the flip side of that is you can't judge a book by its cover, but I could tell you the frequency with which you can. And so that's what I'm currently working on. So let's say once I finish that, I do obviously want to publish it. So I would write it up and I would send it to an editor of a journal that I want to be in. That editor will then read it and make a decision to send it to reviewers or to send it back. They may send it back and say, revise, resubmit. So fix it, send it back. Here are my thoughts. Or, sorry, we're not gonna publish this no matter what. So try elsewhere or have a good day or whatever. Let's say though that they send it on to the reviewers. This is the peer review process. They don't just send it to anyone. Whatever your topic is, they will send it to experts in that field, of course. So those experts, let's say there's three of them, there usually are, at least in the humanities, they all read it and give feedback and then make a decision either don't publish, revise, resubmit again, or publish. The first time through, about 5% of articles get a publish right away. Normally, they are revise, resubmit. And most that get through the first time aren't making big claims. They're saying, we're working on something and we thought you should know about it. That's sort of the way that works. So once you get that feedback from the three reviewers, you do your best to take care of all of it. Sometimes, though, reviewer one will say, I want you to change this part. And reviewer two will say, boy, this part is amazing. Keep this just like it is. You then have to think, okay, well, how can I satisfy both? The answer is you can't, but you as the author get to pick what you think is worth changing and what you think should stay the same. Then you send it back in to the editor. They send it back out to usually the same experts plus one new one. And then again, they'll decide, do I want to revise, resubmit? Most places, I shouldn't say most, a lot of places, big name places, will give you one revise, resubmit, and then you're done, unless you're somebody super special, that people know their name. And then that's it. Some other smaller journals might give you two shots at it, but it's very carefully checked before it's allowed to go out. And that is what makes it so rigorous and so dependable when we talk about it being sort of the apex of sources for speeches or papers, essays, any of it. So you'll need to have at least one of those in the first speech and then at least two in the second and third speeches, respectively. Now, beyond that, you need to find a quality source. And that seems broad, and I get that. But you're going to want to find sources that, as we scroll down, are, for example, primary. Maybe if they're not peer-reviewed, because that's separate, they need to be from good news sources. They need to be reliable statistics. They need to be from an appropriate industry piece or, a reputable academic piece from a government agency that applies to your area or from an expert in that particular field. There are things to avoid. So we'll come through all that. But just to get us on track, that's exactly what I mean when I say a quality source. So that's what this is all about. One thing that you should know, this is what I call it, use the say it aloud test. That's just a good way to say, to check if you want to use a source or not. So let's say you read it and you find that it's just great. I mean, it's exactly what you need it to say. But then you look to see where it's from, and it's, I don't know, let's say somebody wrote, it's Johnny's Junk Shack or something, Johnny's Junk Shack of Knowledge. Do you really want to come up in front of the group and say, well, according to a 2019 article from Johnny's Junk Sack of Knowledge, like what the hell? Come on. So do the say it aloud test. Does it hit right? If it does, okay, good. If it doesn't, step back, reevaluate. If it's a news source and it's a news source that we know and are familiar with, that's going to be a good start. But we'll come back to see why that might or might not be a great idea. Let's go ahead and talk about one thing before we get into specific types in terms of where they come from. Let's talk about primary versus secondary sources. I don't know if you're familiar with what this means. If you are, I'm going to tell you, just use only primary sources if at all possible. That means really maybe 2 times this whole semester someone should, and I mean in the whole class, 2 times, not 2 people, should use a secondary source. You can almost always find the primary source. It does take a little more work, but you get there. So let's talk about what that is. Let's jump over. Well, come back. Oops, I was working on some other things. No problem. Let's say that we want to, well, we need to choose a topic is what we need to do that we can use as a running example. Here's what we'll do. Random number generate. All right, so let's see what 1 through 10 will work. 5. So let's take 5 and let's go to Twitter. There's the Speech Labs Twitter. Don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook or Twitter. And I'm going to go to, let me move myself up, explore, trending. We picked 5. Let's see what number 5 is. Expel her now. So this is going to be talking about the Marjorie Taylor Greene. So the short version of this, if you're not familiar, is Congresswoman from Georgia in the House of Representatives is a QAnon subscriber and has done some questionable things in the past. So she, of course, denies that Joe Biden won the election. She says that Trump won and was cheated. She says that Parkland shooting was a false flag attack, so it wasn't real. It was just made up to look real so that people would take their guns away. She says that the Rothschild family, fun one here, has a space laser that they use to start fires to distract the public. I mean, this stuff goes from, your aunt who really buys into some of the stuff they read all the way to just questioning pure sanity. So, you can be a conservative. That's okay. But this person probably shouldn't be making big decisions about the government. That's my opinion. There will be others. And it doesn't matter what my opinion is for the first speech. But the example I was going for here is to simply say we're going to use that as we go forward. But we could sort of brainstorm this out. And if our topic is Marjorie Taylor Greene, then I think we could continue that thinking and say, okay, politics currently in America, they're at a boiling point. This particular person is part of QAnon. What is going on with QAnon? Okay, let's QAnon. You know what? That's pretty interesting. I don't want to pick that because I think one of you may. I mean, it's least possible. It's that interesting. Um, so I'm going to go with something more bland and say guns on the floor of the Senate. So if you're not familiar there was a um, metal detector set up because there's a rumor that one of the congresswomen, Congress representatives there in the House of Representatives, was carrying a gun because she said as much in her ad that she would carry her Glock every day. And so here we go. Let's see what we're thinking about here. Nancy Pelosi has recently said that the threat is from within the House. So let's see what we get there. Threat from within the House. Here we go. Now, if I want a news source, again, I know you know this, but I'm just going to click the news tab on Google. And yes, go to Google first. We'll talk about that. What I'm going to show you here is the difference between primary and secondary sources, though. So let's say it doesn't matter. We'll go with this. Here we go. So, House Democrats briefed about security preparations ahead of President-elect then Joe Biden's inauguration, said there's an increased threat. Sure. Now, where you see this stuff that is highlighted, let's just check and see what that is. It's probably going to take us to, you bet, another news article that is going to tell us more about that topic. Let's say that we get here and we just focus on this paragraph. Just picked it. The planned votes come as the FBI sent a warning to law enforcement agencies about possible armed protest. Okay. So the FBI sent a warning. If I wanted to say that, according to an NBC News article, the FBI sent a warning to law enforcement agencies, that would be not the best way to go. Is it accurate? Yes. But we could find more. So if I click this one, I'm going to an FBI memo warns of law enforcement. Here's a more primary source. Let's see in this one too. The memo was first reported by ABC News. Now I can find the first report. And they must have done it from Twitter, I guess, because this is where it linked me to. Let's go back. Where is this going to go? Twitter. Okay. Oh, duh. Sorry. You can tell it's 9:30 on a Saturday. So this guy, Josh Margolin, he works, there you go, for ABC News. And so new FBI now reports in a bulletin, this kind of stuff. And he's attributing this information to Aaron Katersky. Sure. Let's check old Aaron out here. He also works for them. Can we... Let's see what he tweets about. I'll tell you what, let's do this a little different. So this went out January 11th at 11:46 a.m. So we know we need to get back at least that far. Here we are on the 12th. Oh, where's a good looking guy? So here we are. This is okay. Let's see. So I wanted to see if they put anything back here that might give us an even more primary source. Okay, well, we won't spend more time looking, but this is at least the most primary that we could find. It was from Twitter, when we could say Aaron Katersky, or Katersky, however you want to say it, first reported this information, and ABC News as a whole picked it up on January 11th. That would be fine. key things again. ABC News, January 11th. In a tweet, Aaron Katersky, which was then retweeted or cited by Josh Marigold, both of ABC News, said that, and that's as far as you can get. That's as detailed as you can get, and that's fine. That's exactly what you want to do. Okay, let's get back out of here for a minute. There we go. So that's the difference between a primary and a secondary source. The primary source is as far back as you can go. The secondary source is just what pops up. It could even be tertiary, right? Second, third, fourth level. But look for those citations and things. Look for hyperlinks like we just saw. Yes, Wikipedia is a great place. We're going to see that in just a few minutes. And most news sources do use those hyperlinks. So primary is what you want. Now, let's talk about academic peer-reviewed journal articles. And we've talked about where they come from, so let's skip the peer review process. But they are the most reliable, and you've seen why. What you can do with these, too, is follow a chain of citations if you want to. So you can see if there's an article that you think is good for what you want, you could see who they cited, and then find that article and see who they cited, and keep going and going and going. And eventually you will go back in time. I mean, that's how it works. You can use Google Scholar for this. I like Google overall. However, I don't recommend it because you're going to see some things that you can't get to easily, and you're going to see other things that you can't get to at all. And I think it's just better and easier to go to GVSU's databases. So let's take a look at that and close some of these news windows here. Let's go to gvsu.edu/library. When you get here, a lot of folks are just going to be tempted to start typing here. Don't do that. I mean, you could do it that way and get where you want to go, but I don't recommend it. You can go to databases. If you want to do that, this is where these journals are kept. You could go through and look at all the journals. I mean, we've got 335 databases. I prefer Academic Search Ultimate. I mean, that's, in my opinion, for the majority of things you'll look up, that's your place to go. So you can definitely go directly to it that way. You could go to subject guides. And the only reason I really plug this is because I helped make it. But if you go to communications and then find this class, Com 201, speech, and then come over here to articles and databases, you'll see these that pop up. Academic Search Ultimate, JSTOR, PsycInfo, Web of Science. So I like Academic Search Ultimate. So let's go there. Okay, so this is what you will see when you get inside for the search engine. Notice it's a little different. If, again, you're familiar with this, sorry. If you're not, it's not bad at all. So with this, you're getting a lot of different databases. So while it looks like we've only got 335, this one's got, good grief, let's see if it'll tell us. There's quite a few even just within here. Again, these are databases within databases. So these aren't just the journals. By the way, if you were a private person just wanting to buy a membership to this just to use it, you'd pay about $3,000 a year. So why not take advantage of it? All right, so let's go up here to the search box, and instead of typing everything in, let's spread it out a bit. So if we want to look at, let's do Congress and guns and House floor, because like the House floor, and you can also sort these out, or and not. We'll use that. Field being optional, we're not going to mess with that. If you have like an author and like a piece of the citation, you could put it in and then tell them what piece it is, and that can help you find things. I'm just going to hit search. Congress, guns, House floor. I found 6,555 articles. Now, I want you to read through all of these. I'm kidding. Don't read through all of these. Instead, Let's start filtering some things out. So go over here to the left, and you'll see a few things that are going to be really important. First of all, click on scholarly peer-reviewed journals. That took us from 6555 down to, drum roll please, 2,332. So, I mean, that cut us more than in half. Great. Now, that's still a boatload of articles, so we don't want all those. Let's click these other two boxes, references available. That means that you can see who they cited. Oh, look, now we're all the way down to 344. And click full text. Oh, we got all of them. So 344. If you click full text, you know that whatever it is you see, you're going to be able to read the whole thing. And if you read an abstract, you go through like 12 of these things, and you see an abstract that you're like, oh man, that's it, that's perfect. And then you see you can't get it. Oh, that's no fun. So we're going to do a lot of those limitations, and we want to be current. So let's bring this thing up and say, we'll just shoot for broad here. The past 20 years. Now we're down to 324. There's still a lot, obviously. So let's see what we can get. See if I can reword my search a little bit. Let me refine the numbers and bring it up to last year. Might be bad, might be good. Abolish safe harbor. Yeah, that's not what we want. So let's spread this out. Okay, let's put in carry guns. 170. I don't know what this is, but it keeps popping up first. So let's see what we got here. Okay. So here, this is an interesting piece. So let's say we could go through all of these and find something I'm sure that works. This can work, but this is where you have to think outside the box a little bit. Hang with me on this. I'm talking about Congress carrying guns, right? Representatives carrying guns on the House floor. Let's say I don't find anything peer-reviewed on that, but I have found other things. So, for example, let's just go with the first thing here. Second sentence. He argues that Congress's critics focus too heavily on its legislative function and ignore several important non-legislative powers that enable Congress to exert significant authority vis-a-vis the other branches. So, great. Some people say that we have too much of a focus on that. What does that mean? I would have to read it and find out. But in the end, the review therefore submits that while reinvigorating Congress's underappreciated powers is a good idea in theory, the practice may prove more challenging. So let's say I just wanted to say, things are really divided right now in Congress. There are Republicans and Democrats, the left and the right, the QAnon, the Never Trumpers, the conspiracy theorists. You've got the activists. Boy, we got all kinds of different people and personalities. Some folks can't even agree that. Some people in Congress don't even agree on what they all have the power to do when it would benefit them. In fact, one article, according to a Yale Law Review piece from 2018, said that, and then I would cite it. So, I could go with something like this. Let's see if there's anything else that would be useful. Is the Second Amendment becoming irrelevant? Discusses laws governing gun control in the U.S., Gun Control Act. So even then, if I wanted to go back and take a historical perspective, I could go and look at this article and find some good information. then cite it. It can be outside the box. It doesn't have to say what we think about carrying guns on the house floor. And this, oh, look, it's a perfect match. That's unlikely to happen. So get outside of that expectation and start thinking about how you can still use what you find. By the way, over here on the left side, PDF full text, this is where you'd go and you get that whole article. If you wanted to read it, you thought this is a good one. And by the way, on here, you can get the good information. So this is according to the Indiana Law Journal from 2018. Look, that's what I need to cite. You can go in and, again, read this entire thing. But you could go there and get your citations, or you could do it right here in this line. Source, Indiana Law Journal, 2018, Volume 93, Issue 1, all that good jazz. Again, this is good to have for a paper, but for an oral citation, Indiana Law Review, 2018. The date and the publication. Here's how you can remember that. If you're in Allendale, if you have a date, you're going to the pub, right? Main Street Pub. So date and pub. That's it. That's what you need. All right. So let's jump back over. Whoops, wrong way. And move on here. I think we covered all of that. Yeah, you don't really need to evaluate these because, again, the peer review process evaluated it for you. All right, news sources. Let's move on to this topic. They're not all created equally, right? So we know all about fake news and partially true news and skewed news and biased news and all this stuff. So what I would tell you is this: favor easily recognizable news sources over unfamiliar ones. There's a caveat there. Make sure that they're credible and well known. You know, InfoWars is pretty well known, but it's also bunk. I mean, it's just garbage. So the reason I say easily recognizable is not because it's popular, it means it's right. That's not it. But if it's popular, the audience doesn't have to think about, what was that? I've never heard of that. I wonder if that's right. Is that credible? So if you can find something that's useful in a CNN or a Wall Street Journal, something like that, great, go for it. If not, and you can find that something is still credible, well, just give us a brief description, and I mean a single line, about why that source is credible. So let's say you find something, I'm looking around my room again, Tiger Shark sanding pads. Okay, great. So let's say I found something on tigershark.net, and people are like, what the hell is Tiger Shark? And then I come back and I say tigershark.net from 2018. By the way, Tiger Shark is a website that collects articles from a variety of different college newspapers and puts them together. I would want to go ahead and find that college newspaper, obviously, but if you can give us a little piece of the information. Now, remember, a lot of this will be taken care of because you're going to dig and you're going to find the primary source. But do tell us about your uncommon or unfamiliar citations if needed. Search for Google News. We already did that one. We saw that. Local news is usually more, I say less biased than national news, including, the Lanthorn all the way up to, the Detroit Free Press is, it's big. So does it have some bias? Of course, but not, it's probably a little more than what, the Grand Rapids Press would have. I don't know. Is it Detroit Free Press? I hope so. Sorry if I got that wrong. Next up, oral citation, name of the source and publication. Remember, if you have a date, take them to the pub. Source name is the publication. So how are you going to evaluate news sources? This is really important. First of all, make sure that it's current. I frequently, less now than before, but I would see people who are very intelligent, including administrators at universities, post articles that were fine, like, it's coming from NBC News or ABC News, but it would be like 3 years before. And, sometimes it's kind of like strange when you see people post like, oh, did you know so-and-so passed away? Yeah, like 4 years ago. But, if they bring something up from the past that doesn't really seem timely, that's a problem. So just check your date to make sure that things are modern. They're current. Also, with that, if you maybe use a statistic out of an article and it's from 2003, well, it might be interesting and the information might be important, but unless you're going to tell us how that's changed over the past 15 plus years, then it's really not that useful because it has done that. It's changed. One thing to really consider is bias and reliability. And I've got here CGraph and then a reference for media bias fact check. Um, we're going to go and look at those in a minute. What I will tell you, though, before we get there, is look for an author to see if an author is listed. Now, the AP or the Associated Press and Reuters news agency, they're called wire services, and they do not put authors' names in their pieces, and that's something they've always done. So if you don't see an author listed, it's a red flag, except for AP and Reuters, which are both reliable, non-biased, generally sources. Do not use blogs or opinion and editorial work. There could be an opinion exception in a few minutes, but and blogs too. If it's a blog, anybody can contribute to it, or non-experts can contribute to it, and that's a problem. So, if it's dealing with should we carry guns, should we allow Congress people to carry guns on the floor of the House, and you get me giving my opinion, let's say. Who cares? I'm not an expert in that area, so I don't. It doesn't matter what I write on my blog about it. However, if you have a firearms expert or a maybe they're looking at it medically from gunshot wounds and they're a medical doctor, they're an attorney and they're talking about gun laws. Those people are experts in the field that's relevant, that's salient right now. So if they posted that to a blog, okay, but then don't accredit it to the blog, accredit it to the expert. All right, but make sure they are experts. More on that in a minute. Last thing here, beware of fake news. I know that you're familiar with things like The Onion and all that, but lots of satire out there. And, gosh, it was like 4 or 5 years ago now. Some congressman got up and cited, it wasn't The Onion, but it was one of the ones similar to it. It's not coming to me right now. But I mean, on the House floor, just, here's an article today in the whatever it was, and it says this. Can you believe it? And half the people got, they were like, wait, are you serious right now? Oh, you don't realize? Oh, no. You not only embarrass yourself, you lose all your credibility, and nobody's going to be persuaded eventually by you. If you're concerned, there is a list of satirical news websites on Wikipedia that's pretty accurate and up to date. So just Google Wikipedia satire news and you'll find it. Now, let's jump back up here to this reliability and bias and a couple other things. Let's scroll down in your packet here. I'm going to zoom out just a little because we're going to come to this. This is a chart that will tell you sort of where different outlets in the media, where their biases are. So as you can see, the way this works, closer to the top means more fact, less opinion. Closer to the bottom means more opinion, less fact. Then you've got the left or more liberal over here, or more right or more conservative slanted over here. Now, of course, not all media outlets are listed. That would just be impossible to do in this way. But you see many that you're probably familiar with. If you find anything, in this green box, it's good. Use it. So that would be AP, Reuters that I mentioned, AFP, Bloomberg, ABC News, CBS News, PBS, USA Today, NPR, BBC, Axios, Politico. Notice NBC News is here. That's, just to be clear, not the same as MSNBC News, which is over here. So those are two different agencies. They just happen to be both owned by NBC. You got Time, Wall Street Journal, Christian Science Monitor, The Hill, the Fiscal Times. These are good. These are good. The Guardian. Now, if you get out of that and you get down to the yellow box, let's tighten it up a little. The yellow box is okay too, but you really want to be sure to think about where it's coming from. So, you know, MSNBC versus the Washington Times, for example. Both those are pretty well. Uh, the Washington Times sometimes make things up. MSNBC can characterize things in a very desperate or dramatic way when maybe that's not required. But other ones up here that you might see a lot of places, the Atlantic, Vox, the New Yorker. On the right, you might see the National Review, Weekly Standard. Those are good. These other two Washington papers, the Examiner and the Times, they're there too. Notice CNN is down here. So it's a little left, but they moved it down. It used to be about here because they've just taken more time on their TV schedules to talk about opinion. If you're below there, you don't want to do it. Don't go there. Huffington Post, I'm kind of not a terrible. I think they're all right. They've gotten better since this came out 2 years ago. BuzzFeed has really blown up, so it's moved up. Over here, yeah, maybe. The Federalist OAN has gotten worse. It's down here somewhere now. There's Breitbart, The Blaze, which is the annoying guy. I'm going blank on him right now. We got InfoWars, just strange things. Down here with the National Enquirer, if you're down here, you're in trouble. On the left, it's not just the right. Occupy Democrats, you'll see this a lot on Facebook. Same thing with the Palmer Report. So just be aware of what you're getting. Now, when you look at this whole thing, it doesn't necessarily mean there's no truth down here and no truth down here. It's the framing. And so we want to make sure that we are being as objective as we can and factual as we can. So we want to stay here. Yellow box, but definitely green if you can. Now, another outlet or way that you might check some of this stuff. Oh, there's my beautiful art. Where statistics, you don't want to do that. Here we go. Let's go to Media Bias Fact Check. MediaBiasFactCheck.com. You can tell I go there frequently. This is a news service where, what's a research firm really, that gives, they get educated people to come together. They read news articles from different outlets, but they take away all the identifiers so you don't know where it's from. And they rate it on a scale of informative. How informative is it? Does it include bias? How's the language? Is it leading? Is it emotional? This sort of stuff. And from there, they rate different news outlets or media outlets. So you've got the least bias, left center, right, all the way over to conspiracy, pseudoscience, questionable sources, satire, right? We talked about that, pro-science stuff. So you can check all those out. And if you want to search for something in particular, you could go in and let's just do CNN. There it is. CNN has left bias. And that's all they're going to tell us for now about it. But there are others. CNN, globalnews.com, questionable source. Those look like ripoffs there. A little left bias on that one. So you've got some different outlets there. But the big thing we were looking for is left. Let's do OAN, which is hard to write. And they've just got it down as questionable source. So they've even moved it off of the hard to write to questionable source. Same thing with Rumble, which is like the new conservative YouTube. So they try to give you some others that might be similar. Sort of like if you bought this, then here's some more information. Navarro report, that guy worked in the White House for a long time. But anyway, run yours through here. You might just check least biased and see, okay, see, look at all the local news, right? Tons of local news. it's usually much more reliable. And it's in alphabetical order, not from most to least biased. All right. So check out your sources. If you find something that's a little unfamiliar, you might go there first and check it out. Let's jump back up here and go back to our news sources. So, how do we deal with these? Again, date and publication, but we need to evaluate them. So, we're going to check that graph. We're going to look at media bias, fact check. We're going to make sure it's not fake news, make sure it's not satire. Next up, statistics. Now, statistics can definitely be taken from either of the first two sources. So you got news sources and you've got the academic peer-reviewed journals. If you take a statistic from a peer-reviewed journal article, you're done. Just take it and go. Cite the article. If you take it from a news source, you likely will want to dig deeper. And that's going to be because of the primary, secondary source separation. So let's go back and see number of, I don't know, let's do number of women in Congress for now. Tie that in, and I want news. Record number of women to be sworn in, including new squad member. So, look at this. A record number of women and women of color were sworn in on the 117th Congress. Great. Notice the links. Let's click the link. This is taking me to Good Morning America, which is through ABC News. And this is going to tell me what? This is their site. Led some members to question Pelosi's leadership. Grapple over these losses, sure. See if there are any other links that would get me more specific. I mean, this one's one of these deals where, you don't really need a primary source. This is about as far as you want to go, really. But as an example, though, let's see if we go here. Takes us to an ABC News article. In a letter to Democratic colleagues, Nancy Pelosi announced. Let's click that. We've got another ABC News article. 2018 election. So that'll link you there. I'd really like to see that actual letter. Oh, there's Marjorie Taylor Greene, the person that we were talking about. Let's see where we get with that. Georgia Republican. Okay. So this might be some good background information. Again, just keep looking. You'll find stuff. So the statistic was back there with the article from Good Morning America. Let's do how many people believe QAnon. We'll go to news. Let's see what we find. We've looked at some of these, but we'll look at others. Well, it's not clear how many people have used it. Let's see what else they can tell us. But we do know that Twitter has suspended 70,000 accounts. There's a good stat. Let's click that, and this is going to take us to another NBC News story. Twitter has suspended 70,000 accounts. The social media company said, highlighted on Monday. Let's click that. Blog on Twitter. So this one is a blog, sure, but this is the actual company statement by Twitter Safety, right? So let's click on that. You see that. So this is an official account. We can go back and we'll find that they took out 70,000 accounts here. And we can cite it all the way back to, according to Twitter, through their Twitter Safety account on their social media platform on the 12th of January, 2021. They suspended, and that's how you're going to cite that and run with it. Okay, Keep chasing those links. They're there. It doesn't take but an extra minute or two. And if you hit a wall, okay, either use what you've got where you are or dig in a different direction. Okay. Dum, dum. So, a couple other websites that are just specifically for statistics: Gallup, Pew Research, 538. These are very useful. Whoops! Don't do it. Let's go to Pew. We'll do Gallup. Gallup.com. And let's say we want to search. Let's do that. And we want to know more about guns in Congress. Let's see what we get. A letter to elected representatives from average American. Let's see when this is from. November 20th. So, a little bit before all this good stuff. So they've got an opinion piece here. I really want their statistics, though. Let's do politics. View all politics. Here we go. If you think about like presidential approval polls, that kind of thing, this is one of those. So there's just tons of them. Let's see. Congress's job approval. This is from today, right? Yep. From today. So we know it's the latest and greatest. We could talk about congressional job approval. If you get to your persuasive speech and you wanted to just screenshot this and throw it on a slide, feel free. If you wanted to recreate it, feel free. But here's this boost in approval. Here's another link, and this will take us to another story with other stats. So again, go to one of these polling sources, Pew, Gallup, 538, and follow those links again, and you'll find really interesting things. So how do you evaluate those? Well, again, make sure that it's current, because if a statistic isn't current, it's useless. And also think about the motive. Who paid for the study or who conducted it? So right now, let's see, Donald Trump was a poll about impeachment, I think. Let's see if we can. Yeah, here. So just look at the way this is laid out. First of all, this is from Politico. So while we're getting there, I keep going the wrong way. Let's go back down here and see where Politico is. Okay. Sorry if you already see it. I saw it that it was here. It's right here. So it's good. It's in the green box. We can trust it. Slightly left, but not far. Trump poll shows impeachment backlash hitting Cheney. Now, Donald Trump's political operation has commissioned a poll, and let's see if they'll give us any more information than that. Politico. McLaughlin writes to Jason Miller, the former president's senior advisor, in a memo outlining the results. Let's click on that. Oh, here we can see it. McLaughlin and Associates. So we know Trump paid for it, and McLaughlin and Associates carried it out. You could, and I'll save you the time, you could Google McLaughlin and Associates, and you'll find that they're not usually very accurate. They're usually very skewed, and they promote right-wing stuff. So, they tell you what they think would promote what they agree with. So with that, it might seem like, wow, that's a really good source here. We've got an official poll that says bad things about Donald Trump's enemies, but it was paid for by Donald Trump and ran by a firm who likes him. So you got to take it for what it's worth. Excuse me. All right. Next up, popular industry sources. These are the least reliable, mainly because when these are published, people are usually trying to sell something, but that doesn't mean that it's useless by any means. Still avoid the blogs, but price guide, you see them there, product reviews, ingredient lists, that kind of stuff. That's still great. Also, they usually have some very specific information that you can only find about products or companies or whatnot on their own website. So, go ahead and find those where you need to. Be aware of this too good to be true claim. It's like any infomercial where 99% of the time it works 98% of the time with 65, right? So just be skeptical of that, but it's okay to use these. Next, academic or university sources. Notice this is separate from peer reviewed. This isn't the same. So this is something that you'll see a lot of. Like there was an article from Harvard that said, okay, great. That doesn't make it peer reviewed because it's from Harvard. It's not a bad sign that it's from Harvard, but it could be an opinion piece, for example. Now, if it was from Harvard and it's published in a journal that's peer reviewed, that's great. Tell us the name of the journal. So you might have to dig a little for that. But beyond that, even, there's different types of schools out there. So if a school that was, sort of an R1 or the top research schools, R1s, R2s, was talking about something related to a liberal arts school, they're not really experts on that. That's not their area. These folks talk more about big research items, right? Comprehensive is what Grand Valley is. So it's a focus on teaching, but we still value research heavily. So, we might talk about the balance between teaching and research. Great. From Grand Valley, that'd probably be useful. And then more liberal arts stuff. Do note the background of the university. So, if you were talking about evolution and you found an explanation for it on Harvard's website versus Liberty University, their website, which Liberty happens to be the biggest Christian school in the world, you'd get very different views on it, different interpretations of it or discussions about it, yet they would both be from universities. So again, use your best judgment here, and again, does not make it peer reviewed. Government agencies. These are fairly reliable, especially when it is about their area of influence or expertise. So, agencies, the alphabet soup out there, the EPA, CDC, FBI, CIA. By the way, the CIA has a World Factbook website. It is impressive. You should check that out if you're interested in traveling. If you ever leave the country, you should have that like on your phone, auto reloading. I mean, seriously, it's really useful. So go to these places if it fits your topic, and don't forget the big cabinet positions here too. So education, defense, that kind of stuff. Health and human services. That might be for a COVID speech would work. Labor, jobs, that kind of stuff. And then you've got your expert and opinion testimony. Hear me out on this. This will be really important in that you are surrounded, at least virtually right now, by experts on a variety of topics. You're at a university, so we have a lot of experts, a lot of people with doctor in front of their name. And so for people like me with doctor in front of our name, we are experts, but only in our field. Okay, so again, if you asked me my opinion on a political matter or scientific matter, who cares what I think, really? I mean, I'm no more of an authority on that as you or anyone else that's not an expert. Now, if you ask me a question about communication, about presidential debates, about communication centers, strategic communication, interpersonal communication, yeah, that's me. You can cite me. I'm an expert on that, but not in other fields. So what does it mean to be an expert? Well, you've got three ways. One is a terminal degree, like a PhD, MD, JD is an attorney, MFA, Master of Fine Arts. There are others. An ED, education, doctor of education. You could second here have a certification from an accrediting body. So, for example, you can't go to school and get a PhD in electrical engineering. Well, yes, I'm sorry, that's a lie. You can, but you don't have to be a electrical engineer in order to be an electrician or a mechanic. You could go and be an engineer and a mechanical engineer and get a PhD in that. But if you are an auto mechanic, you probably don't have a master's degree, just guessing, but that doesn't mean that you still can't even be more advanced than someone with that. If you are certified as an expert on a particular type of car, type of engine, brand, you are an expert. You count. So, I mean, I've got one of my cousins is a master electrician, and this guy didn't even finish. He's got his GED, and he's a master electrician. He's been to prison, and he makes more money than I do. I mean, come on. So these folks are experts, but hey, got to give them credit. The third way, beyond a terminal degree or certification, is to have 20 years of professional experience in a specific field. Not just, you've been around for a while, I knew somebody involved with, no. You were involved professionally, meaning you were paid to be involved for 20 years or more. That's how you're an expert, at least for our purposes. Now, you may have other people who have firsthand testimony. They were there, they saw it. That's great, that's useful, but you can't cite it as a source because that's a lay opinion. You can still include it. I mean, by all means, it adds context, it adds credibility, it adds one more voice to support what you're saying, but you don't want to hang your hat on it. You don't want to, bet on that being accurate, especially this firsthand experience and eyewitness testimony. That is the least reliable form of evidence in a court of law, because people remember things the way that either they want to or the way that they're able to, based on how fast things happen, the shock level they have, etc. So you have a bank robbery and you have 5 eyewitnesses. Well, they all may describe the person a little differently. Maybe, it was a guy about 6 feet tall, rather thin, was wearing this kind of outfit. But other people would make assumptions, or at least in their brain, they may fill in a gap like, oh, no, it was a white guy. No, I thought he was a black guy. Oh, no. Well, I thought he was like 6'1", maybe. No, he was more like 5'7". It's all just our points of reference and biases and all this stuff coming into play. So that's why you can't use that as a source. But here's the big takeaway from this section. If you are talking about something that we teach at Grand Valley, or something tied to or connected in some way to a topic we teach at Grand Valley, write an email, find a professor in that department and go for it. So, if we're talking about the guns in Congress, well, I could email, a criminal justice professor and ask about that. I could email someone who does legal studies and talk about the legality of it. I could email someone in political science and get sort of the, political implications of it. I could email someone in history and talk about how that's played out before. You name it. It depends on what I want to know. Call and ask somebody. I mean, that's a lost art almost, but you should really take advantage of it while you can. So the difference is, if you're a student and you write a professor an email and ask a question, they're probably going to give you an answer, depending on how busy they are, but they'll get back to you. If you graduate and then come back and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this thing. Do you have time for an interview? Well, if you're not a news agency, then sure I do, but I'm a consultant and I'm, $200 an hour. So take advantage of it now, right? Go ahead and reach out. Why not? There are people, we love to help you. Really, professors at Grand Valley are amazing, students too, but make sure that, you're reaching out and using that as a resource. Okay. What are we going to avoid? Wiki pages, including Wikipedia, blogs, again, unless clearly written by an expert, non-experts, and then out of context work. So an article on medicine that mentions money, and you're citing the thing about the money. So if you find that you want to do a speech on the cost of healthcare in America being too high, and you find an article about a vaccine, or that's not a good example, but a new medication that costs $1,000 a dose. And you cite that, man, can you believe it? This medication's $1,000 a dose. Well, if you read the whole article, maybe you found that, yeah, it's outrageous because it only costs, $4 to make it. Or maybe you found that it is the research that has gone into this really drives the price up. Plus, these ingredients are rare, so that's why it costs so much, and they can justify it in some way. Well, you need to give the whole context, right? So be careful with that. As I mentioned before, when you're citing things orally, you can even you need the date and the publication, but just use according to an article from NBC News from this year, according to a journal article in the Communication Centers Journal from last year. That's it, right? We don't need the author's name unless they're a well-known person. I mean, if Bill Gates wrote something or Albert Einstein wrote something, yeah, you're damn right, drop their name. But otherwise, we don't need to know. We definitely don't need to know the title of the work. Again, unless it's something very well known, right? So keep that in mind. If it's a classic, of course, cite the title. What we need to be able to do is to generally locate that source. That's what we need, these oral citations. Plus, this is going to keep you in safe territory from plagiarism, citing your sources. And again, as we said earlier, if you have an unfamiliar source, give it a little background and context. All right, we've talked about the topic and source worksheet. We talked about the media bias chart. Remember, green box is what we want. Yellow is okay, but you might acknowledge there's some bias there. Next week, we'll talk about the outline and the evaluation form. Also next week, don't forget, hold on, I'm going to zoom up to the top. No, pun, zoom, sorry. Didn't mean to. Here, next week, we're going to see that you've got that topic and sources sheet due. Remember, it's not this week. I'm just talking about it because it goes with the material. Do your quiz this week. If you want to email me and ask about your topic, what I think, maybe you need some feedback, great, happy to help. That's due next week, and then we'll continue with the course. You see it there. So, sorry about the camera not working, although it may have worked out better. Otherwise, let me know if you have questions. I mean, this is really important here because while it doesn't require you to give a speech at this point, this is setting you up for the rest of the semester. So I want you to think carefully about what you choose and why you choose it, and that will make your life better as you get yourself through one more semester and get the speech class off your requirement list. All right, everybody. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.